What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bootleg Football Podcast, part 2 of our free agency recap. I would say we're probably solidly in the middle of the third wave at this point. It's been kind of an interesting free agency period because there's not really a whole lot of like medical checks or visits that teams can do. So a lot of teams are kind of flying blind here, but it hasn't really stopped a whole lot of money from flowing into players' coffers. There's been a lot of major deals announced since we did episode 1 of this recap, including a ton of movement in the quarterback market. But we'll get into all that a little bit as we go on in the show. First things first, as always, my wonderful co-host EJ Snyder is here. And so I got 2 questions for you, EJ. What are you drinking and how are you feeling?
I think those questions are going to be related, or at least the answers will be related. I'm feeling fine. And what I'm drinking is a very nice tequila that I know you actually have because I bought you some when I came down to visit. Cazadores Blanco, very reasonably priced tequila, but it's got a beautiful kind of floral. I like it in a chilled glass, goes down very smoothly. So I've got a small glass of that. So I'm feeling fine. Looking forward to talking about this second wave of free agency because we definitely have sort of gone over the peak. Lots of big money still flying around, but most of the high-level talent slid off the board by now. There's some good value depth signings left, but feels like we really sort of powered through the middle section. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, one note, when you gave that to me for the first time, because normally I'm not really a tequila guy, you gave me
That's what everybody says.
But, oh my lord, that was one of the smoothest things I have ever drank in my entire life. What was the name of it again?
Cazadores, and it's the Blanco. So they make all 3, a Reposado and an Añejo, which I have versions of upstairs as well. But I really like the Blanco, especially in a chilled glass. You don't have to put ice in it. You can just throw the glass in the freezer for about 10-15 minutes. Gives it a really nice, smooth finish. No heat whatsoever.
Zero burn.
A little bit of fruit to it almost, but nothing overpowering. Just good, solid, clean agave. Good stuff.
It's dangerous. I'll tell you that. It's dangerously
Well,
smooth.
There's that. Yeah, there's that too. But we'll keep it in check.
Yeah, I kind of went the opposite. You know that dead guy whiskey that was
yeah.
Let's just say ode to formaldehyde. Wasn't the best whiskey. It's
straight up. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's made by Rogue. I guess they're called a brew distillery because they're more known for their dead guy ale, and they use the wort from that to make whiskey. And it smells a lot different than it tastes. So I mixed it with Coke to kind of even it out a little bit because I still got a whole bottle of it. So that is now my mixing whiskey. And it's okay with Coke.
Dead guy and Coke.
It's yes. But I spent $45 on the bottle, and I'm not going to waste it in these economic hardship times, EJ. I'm going to make use of this really bad whiskey.
Reduce, reuse, recycle, and I appreciate your adaptability. That's pretty solid stuff. But yeah, it's that stuff is straight up. It'll take the hair off. It's something else.
Yeah, if you ever want to play a prank on a family member, just literally pour them a glass of that and watch them melt in front of your eyes. But with that, let's get into something that's a lot of bit more pleasant than dead guy whiskey. And let's talk about this quarterback market. Obviously, we're going to start with the biggest name of the punch, Tom Brady, going down to Tampa, signed a 2-year deal, honestly kind of a friendly deal for both sides. And this fundamentally changes the landscape of the entire NFL, especially within the NFC, and especially within the NFC South, which is obviously a very competitive division. My personal thoughts on it, I think he chose Tampa just because they have an astounding array of weapons, and clearly that was important for Tom. He really wants to make another run at a ring. He didn't feel like New England was investing in his supporting cast enough for him to realistically make a run at a ring. Honestly, he's probably correct, especially if you have to get into a shootout with teams like Kansas City or Baltimore. Like they didn't have the firepower. So he was looking for a team that had firepower that he could actually make a run with. You look at Evans, you look at Godwin, you look at Howard. I mean, even Brait as a tight end number 2, if you're running a lot of 12 personnel. I mean, there's so much there in Tampa. They don't obviously have a good offensive line, but I think if he's getting the ball out quick enough, he can kind of mitigate some of their struggles up front. But just in terms of pure talent around him, it was one of the best possible situations you could have hoped for. Obviously, Bruce Arians is a great coach. They have some defensive pieces that we can get really excited about. And I think even when you watch Tampa, which I don't know how many Bucs games you watched last year, I happened to watch quite a few of them because my brother-in-law is a Bucs fan, so I watched a lot of Bucs games with him. Really, they were a lot better team than people think. It's just the turnovers absolutely gutted them. And so if you get Tom Brady, who can just cut down on turnovers, and that's it, just throw 1 or 2 less picks a game, this team's in business. They have so much talent. They just need to not beat themselves, and they could very easily go on a pretty significant playoff run.
Completely agree. And what Brady does for them besides that, because he will absolutely do that, he is a much more efficient player than Jameis Winston can ever hope to be. And that's been his hallmark throughout his career. You can say what you want about his arm going south. He's still got a very good arm, especially in the first part of the season, but he is deadly efficient. He is not going to turn the ball over. And he's going to have to work hard, but he's always had to work hard in New England. They have turned over receivers left and right. So learning a new group of receivers is not a new thing for Tom Brady. But it's the way he's going to elevate that building. This is a potentially franchise turning signing for Tampa Bay. This is the kind of thing that happened to Denver when they brought Peyton in. And he said, no, this is how hard you have to work if you want to win it. And everybody in the building didn't want to disappoint Peyton. So they all raised their games. Brady is going to do the exact same thing. He is going to grind. He has always been a grinder. He is going to be there, and he is going to demand. And you bet your butt that the coach, Bruce Arians, is going to say, nope, you listen to the man. This is the guy. He's got all the rings. You do what he says. And he is going to elevate his teammates, both on offense and defense. He's going to demand a level of execution that is higher than what Tampa Bay has been doing. And I agree with you. They were a sneaky good team last year. They scored a ton of points. They were very explosive. But they gave the ball away just as much as they scored. The very famous Jameis stat is 30 for 30, right? 30 touchdowns, 30 picks. If it's, 28 and 5, which is a very likely, Brady stat line, this team wrecks.
Yeah. And also, just from a team building standpoint, we've seen reports of like high profile free agents and a whole lot of players that have been contacting Tampa and saying, I want to play with Tom. I don't care what money you give me. I want to play with Tom. And that's the New England effect we saw for 2 decades of they'll take discounts to go play in New England because they think they can get a ring and they want to play with the GOAT. And I think from a team building perspective, having a legend like Brady is beneficial because whether he takes $30 million or whatever his deal was, I think it was $30 million a year. If you're still saving money on a whole lot of other players because they want to take discounts, that can help you build a better team around Tom, which clearly he needs. It's a better team than what New England was giving him. And that can instantly elevate your roster into championship status. When we look around the rest of the NFC, the Saints will probably give them trouble because the Saints are always good no matter what, even with some of their pieces aging. The Panthers, I think, are a better team than we think, especially with Teddy Bridgewater, who we're going to get into. The NFC East is still a huge wild card. We don't know how good Dallas is going to be. We don't know how good the Eagles are going to be. We can't even trust the Eagles to stay healthy half the time. Washington's still in the process of building. The Giants are still in the process of building. The NFC North is... we could talk about, the Bears defense being elite all we want, but until we can see them figure out the quarterback situation, they might not be a threat. The Packers are the Packers. The West is loaded, but there's still a lot of opportunities for Tampa to make a huge run in the NFC because I think the NFC isn't quite as top heavy going into 2020 as maybe we've seen in the past. A lot of the traditional powerhouse teams are in the middle of either rebuilding or just kind of getting younger. And so there is a window here. And that's not to say that there's not good teams in the NFC. There are plenty of good teams in the NFC, but I don't see like a juggernaut in the NFC other than maybe San Francisco that's on par with the juggernauts that Brady would have to compete with in the AFC. We're talking about Kansas City and Baltimore. There's less obstacles, I think, for him to get that all important playoff bye in the NFC than the obstacles he would have had to go through if he stayed with the Patriots. So overall, it's an extremely smart move for Brady. It's an extremely smart move for the Bucs too. They're going to be able to build a fantastic roster around him and take advantage of a conference that, for the first time in a long time, is really anybody's guess of who's going to win it.
Yeah, it's a massive move, and you're right. The path that he now has to the Super Bowl, which for years in the AFC East, it was an almost automatic bye. But if he gets that team rolling with the talent quickly, and there's no reason to think that he won't, I completely agree that this is a franchise turning move, and he can be right at that upper echelon very, very quickly.
What would you say, again, just kind of keeping it in the NFC South? I kind of think the Panthers were similar to the Bucs last year, where they were honestly a better team than they got credit for. They lost some kind of gut-wrenching games, but early in the year, I felt like they really showed what they could be with like kind of a gritty win over Houston. And, even when Cam got hurt, Kyle Allen stepped in and I think played well for at least a few weeks and kind of showed the potential of what the roster could be if they had consistent quarterback play. Allen had a really horrendous fumbling issue, which cost them, I think, huge in some games, but there was still a lot of talent there, especially on offense. Moore is amazing. I think Samuel's a great number two. McCaffrey is one of, if not the best running back in the league. Like, they have pieces there. And I think you slot Teddy into a team that was looking almost good last year, and just kind of giving, again, just like we talked about with Tampa, just giving that level of efficiency, not making mistakes, being able to convert in the red zone, protecting your defense from having to go out on the field more than they need to, letting your plethora of yak threats with Moore and Samuel and McCaffrey get work in space, and just kind of relieving the defense from having to be on the field all the time. Again, this is a very sneaky good roster. And I personally think Matt Rhule is also an excellent coach. And I think Joe Brady's an excellent offensive coordinator. Like, what they're assembling there, I think a lot of Panthers fans are freaking out because there's a lot of turnover. But what they're assembling in Carolina, I think, is a better team than people believe.
Yeah, I would say that they've reloaded very quickly. And I'm a bit surprised that they made the move for Teddy. We talked about this on our free agent quarterback podcast that we did fairly early on after we launched the channel. And I just kind of tossed this out there as hey, I don't think it's going to happen because Rhule's the new coach and he takes a couple of years to get going and wants to sort of break things down before he builds them up. They went out and got arguably, the top flight mid-level starter, if you're going to go past Brady and, depending on your opinion of Rivers, they got the guy that's most ready to compete right now with the roster they have. They're ready to hit the ground and go. They've got a ton of offensive talent, and I'm with you that they needed a good point guard, and that was the point I brought up on the quarterback free agent podcast, and I just kind of tossed it out there, and we both went, ooh, wouldn't that be cool, but it'll never happen. And here it happened, and it's going to be fascinating to watch. I think Christian McCaffrey is doing a jig right now. He's super happy that he doesn't have to spend another year of his very short running back career, right, with a quarterback that doesn't know what he's doing. He's got a professional quarterback who is efficient and capable and is going to be able to make use of a bunch of those weapons. I think Samuel is the same way. Samuel has got to be doing backflips right now because he knows that he's going to get a lot more accurate balls than he got last year and going to be able to do something with them. Talk about a ridiculous yak threat. Same thing for DJ. So there's a lot of potential here. And, that NFC South is going to be a really interesting division to watch with the imports.
I think there's three teams that you can all legitimately see winning the South. Obviously, the Saints and the Bucs will be favorites, but the Panthers are they're flat out better than people think they are. They have a better coaching staff than a lot of teams around the league. I'm a huge believer in Rhule. I'm obviously a huge believer in Joe Brady, just seeing what he did at LSU and obviously his time with the Saints. And I think a coaching staff and an efficient quarterback, those are the two things that are the rising tide that lifts all boats. It really is. We saw that with New England for 2 decades. If you have an efficient quarterback and a coaching staff that knows what it's doing, I don't want to say the rest of the roster doesn't matter, but that can cover up a lot of holes. So I think Carolina is building it the right way. I will say one of the quarterback moves that maybe I question a little bit more because he was the opposite of efficiency and he wasn't protecting the ball as much as we want him to is Phil Rivers going to the Colts. It seems like for such a long time we would see the Chargers in a one possession game with 2 or 3 minutes on the clock, and we see Rivers throwing a game ending pick almost every time. I just don't think we can trust him to be efficient at this point in his career. I think he trusts his arm almost like he still thinks he's, 30 or 31 when the velocity just isn't there anymore and he thinks he can make throws that he can't. And I think he cost the Chargers a lot of games over the last couple years. We can talk about bad protection all we want. We can talk about injuries all we want. But at the end of the day, the Chargers were in position to win a lot of games that Rivers threw away with picks. And I'm not sure I'm feeling the move to bring him in for a year. I feel like if they wanted to bring in an outside quarterback, there were better options. I understand why they were locked in on Rivers, but I just don't know if I agree with it.
Yeah, we talked about this one as well, and we actually nailed this one. We said if there was a situation for Rivers to go to at this point in his career, that Indianapolis was the one for a multitude of reasons. Indoors, really good offensive line, and great coaching staff that, is made up of a former quarterback, Frank Reich, famously, a famous, former quarterback, and I think, I'm a little bit different than you. I think that Reich is going to be able to turn the tables and say, hey, here's what you did that we still want you to do. Here's what we can't have you do. And here's some sort of sneaky tricks that I had to rely on because Frank Reich played a long time. Towards the end of my career when, the juice just wasn't there, don't go for this one, throw it away. Check it down. We've got Marlon Mack. Throw him a little flare pass or screen pass. Pick up 3 or 4 instead of picking up an interception. And again, Rivers is a very heady quarterback, always has been. I think his brain is going to catch up with the fact that he's got a shot here, but he's got one shot. He's got better protection, but that doesn't mean fling it up there. That means do what your coach says. And if they can make that connection, if Reich and Rivers, who are two guys who I think can make a connection, make that connection, he can make them very much better than they were last year quickly. If he doesn't make that one change, right, that if he can't rein in that one throw at the end of the game that he thinks he can win with, we're going to see similar results. But I don't think we're going to see that. If he breaks down completely physically, if he gets injured in game 6 or something, that may be it. That's fine. But I think if he stays in and sort of meshes with Reich in the offense, that we could see one good year out of him, no more, but one good year where he leads them on a almost sort of, Brett Favre in his first year with the Vikings sort of a deal, where the physical skills had eroded, but the gamer was still there. And I know Rivers brings that. It's whether or not he can rein in, just like you said, that 1 or 2 tosses at the end of the game that turn the tables.
I just think we both agree he's extremely smart. He pre-snap and post-snap, he's as brilliant as ever. The mind has not slowed down with Rivers at all. The problem is, if you've got to go, if you got a go route on against a 2 deep shell and the corner doesn't sink and he lets it go and you're holding the safety in the middle and you have that hole shot on the boundary that 10 years ago you're hitting with ease to Vincent Jackson or whoever. He doesn't have the juice to make that throw anymore. And at least last year, I don't think he knew that he didn't have the juice. Because, corners and safeties were just sitting on that. They would sag off a little bit, like they were faking they were letting it go, and then they would just turn on the jets and sink, and the ball was there every time for them to get. If you get a quarters look and you're throwing double post, and he would try to lead the back post as much as he could, but he just couldn't do it anymore. I think if this is going to work, Reich needs to beat it into his head. 3 steps, ball out. Ball out, ball out, ball out. Don't try to throw it past 15 yards. we're going to do the same thing that the Broncos did with Peyton Manning in 2015. Like, we are running crossers, we are running spacing. Like, maybe if we get a two deep shell, we'll throw a post over the middle if we can kind of like influence a safety out of the way, but don't throw the go ball ever because it's not going to work. Don't throw the deep out, don't throw the dig. Like, just stick to the quick game and the RPOs, and that can work. Anything beyond that is asking for trouble. He just doesn't have the juice.
And I think Reich can do that. I think again, being a former quarterback, being a guy that played the position, at a high level, and say, hey, sit down, have that very honest conversation, pull up the film, pull up all the egregious mistakes, because there were plenty of them just last year with the Chargers, and say, look, this is going to happen over and over again, dome or no dome. This ball's not getting there. I don't expect your arm to rebound. In fact, I don't want it to rebound that way. I want you to do exactly what you're talking about. I want you to hit guys, on target, in stride, when we run scissors, when we run, four hooks. Like, pick the one and get the guy, get the 7 yards, let's move. We're going to have to run that offense. And I think Rivers will come to that understanding. If he doesn't, he'll fail. I think we're in agreement that if he's still like, nope, coach, I got it. Hang on, let me put the team on my back, they're going to fail. But I think Rivers is smart enough and will respond to Reich's influence and say, okay, I'll do what you want me to do. I think it's going to be a bit of a rebirth. I think he's really excited. And again, Rivers has been a Charger his entire career. A change of scenery can be really invigorating. If you've ever changed jobs after even one that you liked for a while, there's good things, there's new things, fresh things to learn. It's a challenge. And I think he's going to resonate to that. And if he can just get rid of that piece where he flings it, especially at the end of the game, he's got a shot to elevate that team.
Yeah, and I hope you're right, because I genuinely love Phillip Rivers.
I know you do.
I love Phillip Rivers. It's just watching him over the last couple of years has kind of broken my heart a little bit, just because I miss.
You do cringe.
I miss the Phil from like 8 or 9 years ago. But this next one, since you're a Bears fan, I want you to take the lead on it, because it's a trade that, honestly, I think as a player, I think we're okay with it, but the compensation that was given up for Nick Foles, both had us scratching our head a little bit, because we both kind of expected him to be cheaper than a 4th round pick, even a compensatory 4th round pick. We both expected if there was going to be a deal, it wouldn't be for that. So maybe as a Bears fans, you can just try to give us an explanation of what Pace is thinking here, because I'm not really sure.
Yeah, they needed something. They couldn't come away without someone, period. And they were reportedly in on Teddy. Teddy chose the Panthers. I can't fault him for that. He goes to an exciting young coach, a franchise that seems to be moving in the right direction, talented playmakers. Now, in Chicago, he had talented playmakers. Who knows how he meshed with the coaching staff. Matt Nagy was considered the Matt Rhule of a couple of years ago, right? Fresh, exciting young coach from the Andy Reid tree. So whatever. Teddy chooses Carolina, so that goes off the table. There was talk of Derek Carr. I had said I didn't think Carr was going to leave. Everybody said up and down that Carr was going to go. And it really came down to, are you going to go with Foles, or are you going to try and get Andy Dalton? And both of those guys are in the same position. You were going to need to make a trade for them or wait for them to be released. And Pace didn't wait for them to be released. He believed that grabbing Nick Foles was the right thing to do to bring in competition, is the way they're labeling it for Mitch Trubisky. I think Foles probably starts because, again, we talked a lot about efficiency at the top of the podcast. Nick Foles is going to be more efficient than Mitch Trubisky was with the ball. Does that mean Nick Foles is terribly efficient? No, it means he's about, we talked about this on Bears Over Beers, lower to mid-pack efficient. If you sort of carve up the league into 3 tiers, the top 10 or 11, the middle 10 or 11, and the bottom 10 or 11, depending on how you slice it, I would say he's bottom of the middle third, but that's still probably 10 points better than Mitch was last year in terms of efficiency, in terms of being able to hit the open guy. There were a lot of schemed routes that were open for Mitch to hit, and he never saw them and didn't hit them. So at the bottom line, Foles increases the efficiency of the offense. I think we'll see a more operable Matt Nagy offense. Is he a top tier starter? He's not. He's no more than a bridge. The fourth rounder is the piece that's most troubling because most people think he would have been released. The second part of this is if you're going to pay the fourth rounder, which I wouldn't have in the first place, you get Jacksonville to eat some of that salary, right?
Because they gave him a player option. Like they redid the contract and gave him an option to get out after a year and then get even more money. It's like, wait, you made a concession to him?
Yeah, I really think this reeks of the Mike Glennon deal when there was nobody bidding for Mike Glennon and Pace goes out and throws big money at him. And it seems to be a pattern now that when Ryan Pace gets committed to quote unquote his guy, he'll do what it takes. And that usually means trading up in the draft if it's a draft pick. And in high profile free agency situations, he'll throw big money in a concession so he doesn't have to not get his guy. And it's a bit hard headed. He has to be a little bit more, let's call it situationally aware, and let the market develop and say, hey, no, I'm not giving you a pick. Let's see if he gets released. And if he doesn't get released, guess what? It's not a huge drop off. The only saving grace for the Foles deal, certainly not the draft compensation, certainly not the money compensation, because I would have wanted the Jags to eat a piece of that contract, is that Foles has familiarity with most folks on the staff. He worked with John DeFilippo, who's now with the Bears, and he also worked with Bill Lazor early in his career. And in this time that we're in, where there might not be organized team activities, and there might be very little time for teams to get together and practice, Foles is absolutely, of the two, the one that's going to be able to get up to speed the quickest between Foles or Dalton. Now everybody's going to say, well, Dalton worked with Bill Lazor too. He did, but he didn't work with DeFilippo. And he does come from a slightly different sort of offensive coaching tree in terms of scheme. Not that Dalton's not smart enough to pick up the scheme. That's not the point. The point is Foles already knows the scheme for the most part. It's the same scheme largely that Peterson runs. It's a variant of the Reed system. He's got the most familiarity. He's going to get up to speed the quickest, but I think that's a fairly weak leg to stand on. So if you can't tell, I'm not super wild about Nick Foles, Chicago Bears quarterback. Is he going to be better, functionally better than Mitch was on the field? I believe he will be. Is that enough to get really excited about? I don't think it is, but it does hopefully give Matt Nagy a shot to let us see his offense working when he has a quarterback that can at least function in it, who can hit an open route when he schemes one open. And he did that many times last year, and Mitch couldn't hit it. So I'm tepidly excited about that part of it. But does Nick Foles give me any kind of warm fuzzies as the quarterback of the Bears? He doesn't.
I think an interesting angle to it is it kind of takes the Bears completely off the table for taking a quarterback in the first 4 rounds of this draft. Maybe they could take one on day 3, but I don't think you're using, especially since they spent a 4th round pick on him, I don't think you're using 2 of your top 4 picks. When you don't have a whole lot of picks in the first place, and you don't even have a first rounder, I don't think you're using 2 of your top 4 picks on quarterbacks in this draft. When, again, it's like I said earlier, it's more of a wide open NFC than we've seen in recent years, because a lot of the traditional contenders are not as insurmountable as maybe they were in years past. I don't think if you're in a position to strike while the iron's hot, when you still have an elite defense, you still have some weapons you can build around on offense. The offensive line is better than people think. They had a down year last year, predominantly because of injuries. But again, this team is still ready to go and ready to make a run. You're not going to use half of your valuable assets on quarterbacks that may or may not be ready to start. So I don't think that they're going to be in the running for like a Jalen Hurts. I don't think they're going to be in the running for, let's say Jordan Love falls to the late first round. They're definitely not going to be in the running to trade up for him anymore. Like those picks that we see them use, it's going to be on interior offensive linemen. It's going to be on tight end. It's going to be on corner. So this my whole Jalen Hurts conspiracy to Chicago, I think, is completely out the window, which is fine with me. And we're gonna get Foles versus Mitch to be the starter. God help you, Bears fans. I don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have the same theory. I understand the reasoning. If Hurts is there, I think he gets taken. Because you're gonna need a year. I don't think he comes in to compete, but he could absolutely be the backup. And what that allows you to do is trade Mitch for whatever you can get. If that's a conditional fifth, if that's a sixth, whatever you can get for Mitch, anybody that'll give you a pick, you can get a pick back.
Call Bill O'Brien. He'll
Yeah,
give
exactly.
you whatever you want.
Now, there are a lot of teams that did like Mitch. And, we've talked about this before, that quarterback whisperers are out there and believe that they'll be able to fix him. And I can see Mitch as a guy that has a late career resurgence at his second or third team when the game finally slows down for him and he goes, oh, and he's a 6 or 7 year veteran and goes, wait a minute, and hits that sort of late career Alex Smith sort of groove and still has a lot of physical skill to back it up. I could see that happening for him. It's not going to happen for him at Chicago. I think if Hurts is still there, maybe he gets taken. Other than that, I probably agree with you. No more high picks on quarterbacks, but I've got a different theory about this draft that Ryan Pace really needs to take the trade up mantra, chuck it out the window, and trade back with both of the second round picks and add a bunch of capital. And I've done it ever since the Foles trade. I've run quite a few mock drafts and, set all the settings to difficult and random boards and the whole bit and traded back and seen what I could get. And you can make a very nice haul of it if you trade back. But if you trade up, you are done. Folks aren't aware of this, but the Bears' fourth rounder was kind of the middle bridge, even though it was a compensatory pick. So at the end of the round, right now, if they don't do anything, they go from pick 50 to pick 164 without a pick. That's 114 picks. That's 44.5% of the players in the draft go off the board between their second round pick and now their fifth round pick.
Can't build a team like that.
You got to have some picks. So he's got 2 2s, right? So he can trade back. And, there's really good evidence of what you can do with just one second round trade back. Bill Belichick did it. And Bill Zimmerman, who does Bears Banner podcast, actually tracked one of those picks and sort of got all the picks that Belichick got from trading down in the second a couple of years ago. He still has a fourth rounder this year from the haul of that pick, right? And there's about 8 other things he got from it. So second rounders are very valuable picks. And if he trades down once or twice, if he pulls a John Schneider and trades down twice with one of those second round picks, he could end up with a third, a fourth, another fifth, another sixth, and really sort of fill the roster, which he needs to do. And at that point, do you take a flyer on a Cole McDonald? Do you grab a James Morgan from Florida International, right? If you're me, yeah, you absolutely do. You stock the quarterback room and see what sticks. You throw it all at the wall until something works. And if that means waiting until you have a first round pick next year and loading up and making a run at a guy with the extra picks you picked up this year, that you can sort of, pitch down the road or trade back into next year, go for it. But you got to get some extra picks, and that means you got to turn those second rounders into some more value.
100% agreed. I think John Schneider and Bill Belichick run 2 consistently successful teams for a reason, and that's because they know the value of quantity over quality sometimes, especially when it comes to the NFL draft, where, let's be honest, it's all a crapshoot in the first place. So if everything's going to be a 50% odds of being a success, you might as well get as many of those 50% odds as you can. So 100% in agreement.
Get the scratch tickets, man.
Get the scratch tickets. Try to hit pay dirt with those. I will say one general manager that I think you and I can agree in his first 2 years that is absolutely killing it. I think we have some questions about individual draft picks, but as a whole, in terms of how to build a team, how to build a culture, how to manage assets, I think Mike Mayock is doing one hell of a job in the free agency class that he's brought in so far this year. In terms of value, in terms of filling holes, in terms of setting himself up to go into the draft where he is not desperate for any one single position and he can truly go BPA. I mean, you go up and down the board with everything they brought in. Corey Littleton, Nick Kwiatkowski, Malik Collins, Marcus Mariota is a backup quarterback, which when we did our free agency quarterback kind of preview type thing, we basically established that Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota are the same guy. They just have different reputations. Bringing him in as a backup, I think, is an excellent move. Nassib as your third or fourth defensive end. Would I do it for $8.5 million? I'm not sure about that, but I mean, they had a lot of money to burn, and they've surrounded.
Shaq Lawson got 10.
I mean, it's not the worst deal in the world. I guess if he's,
Yeah.
I was hoping that they would bring in somebody that would push Furl a little bit more than Nassib would or will. But again, it's not a horrific deal. Maybe it's just not one that I would do because I felt like they needed. Honestly, like the Everson Griffins of the world, I would have thought they would have brought in Griffin to really push or at least help mentor Furl. Again, it's not.
Yeah, they want younger guys.
I know they want younger guys. They want they have a type which they're following to a T. But overall, and we didn't even touch on Jason Witten and Heath and all the veteran leadership they brought in. That culture that they are building in Vegas is incredibly strong, and I think. We always talk about talent wins game, but culture wins championships. I mean, that is a championship culture if I have ever seen one. Like this team's ready to go, in my opinion.
Raiders, baby! Yeah, it's fun to have them back, right? They've not been on the best of footing. Certainly the move to Gruden was questioned severely. I did that at the time. Mayock even had his doubters. I've always liked Mike. I think he does really good work, and now he gets to prove it, right? He gets to put his money where his mouth is and compete against 31 other guys that want his job. And if you look at last year, I think a very solid start, like no major missteps. And this year in free agency, like 3 of these guys, actually 5 of these guys were guys that at one time or another I either talked about on a podcast, identified as a target, somebody I would have liked, showing up on my team. Littleton, I said, was the top inside linebacker available. Nassib, I thought, was a really sort of sneaky replacement for a guy like maybe Leonard Floyd in Chicago if he moved on, which he did. Kwiatkowski, I hoped, would stay in Chicago, played certainly above the level I thought capable of last year. Malik Collins is a favorite, a penetrator, a disruptor through the middle. And Mariota, hey, it's nice to have a clone of your quarterback. If your first string quarterback goes down, you can just plug the second one in. So, there's 5 guys that he's grabbed. The Witten signing, sure, I'm sure he brings winning habits, and the guy's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Nothing against Jason Witten. He's not going to provide a lot as a player at this point, but that core of Littleton, Nassib, Kwiatkowski, Collins, and Mariota, like, those back up the young guys that they drafted last year, Josh Jacobs and, Farrell, you could say what you want about him. They're going to get Abraham back as a safety, right? That's an exciting team. And they did decently last year. They've still got a bunch of picks. They didn't give up picks to get these guys. He's going to get another solid haul. You can count on Mayock to make those picks count. And early returns are very good. I'm not going to crown him. I'm not going to call him king. I'm not going to call him great. But so far what I've seen, I'm kind of quietly over here with both thumbs up, smiling, going, you go, Mike. You're bringing back Raider Nation. And I know there's huge upset about them moving from Oakland to Las Vegas. But there's a lot of excitement, too. And look, bottom line, the fans in Oakland are going to be lifelong hardcore fans. And if the silver and black wins it all, they're going to claim them just the same. So they've got them on a trajectory where, a year from now, if they're really lucky, 2 years from now, for sure, if they keep this up, that's going to be a very, very tough out in the AFC.
Yeah, I do want to touch specifically on Corey Littleton, who I think
beast.
He's a beast.
I love him. He's so good.
So good in coverage. I think him and Schobert were like consensus top 2 linebackers in terms of just coverage ability in this free agent class. And people are saying, oh, why would you spend $12 million on him? Okay, you're in a division with Austin Eckler, Damian Williams, Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay. Like, there's so many running backs in that division. They have to play against 6 times a year that can catch out of the backfield and absolutely slice and dice you on third down. You need a linebacker that will not get embarrassed by them, especially Eckler, especially Williams. You need speed and fluidity and coverage ability at the linebacker position if you want any shot of surviving in that division. So I don't particularly care that they paid him $12 million. I would have done that in a heartbeat because of who they have to play. It is a no-brainer contract to me. And shit, if Blake Martinez is getting $10 million a year, paying Corey Littleton 12 is 100% fine with me.
I'm going to say that anytime we hold up Dave Gettleman contracts as a measuring stick, that our logic is, let's just say, free to be assailed. But I'm with you that Corey Littleton, it's a matchup game. This is a matchup game. As an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator, your job is to find the guy on your squad that you can bring in that is better than the guy on the other squad that he will line up against or cover or compete against or try and bust down in coverage. Doesn't make a difference. And Littleton is, I think, lesser known than a lot of other sort of bigger name middle linebackers in the game. He is every bit as effective in the current NFL. Not the one people think is being played, but the one that's actually being played. And Littleton is a preeminent defender in that league, and Mayock knows it, and so do a lot of other people. And if they have to pay $12 million to get that guy, like you said, in the division they're in, it's going to help them win some games. That guy is going to thrive in that culture, and he's going to be an alpha at that second level. He's got that kind of talent.
100%. I will say, in terms of, again, keeping in the theme of less splashy signings, not huge names that maybe not everybody knows, but phenomenal value that will instantly make a team better. The trio of defensive line upgrades that Buffalo, with Mario Addison, Vernon Butler, Quentin Jefferson, especially Quentin Jefferson, how he got
we can talk about the Hawk. Yeah,
$6.5 million. Are you kidding me? Nobody offered him more than that.
Yeah, it's theft.
How did nobody offer him more than $6.5 million? That blows my freaking mind. And you got
there was a very quiet moan from the Pacific Northwest when Big Q got signed, because they either call him Big Q or Q Jeff, either way. But that guy has been a snap eater for the Hawks. He is a guy that has production. He's been, I don't want to say he's been loud about it, but he's been fairly under the radar. He's been fairly quiet about it, stealthy. He absolutely has produced and contributed when he's been on the field for the Hawks. And when he left, there was a lot of Seahawks fans, savvy Seahawks fans, who were like, oh, we were really hoping nobody noticed, right? And, McDermott, his squad, they noticed and they signed him. They add Vernon Butler, who I think, their staff has familiarity with him from being in Carolina. And Mario Addison as well. Like, the Bills are throwing down the gauntlet. They see, quite frankly, Tom Brady out of the division, and they are loaded up. Like, they believe in Josh Allen. They're going to ride that guy. They're going to surround him with more weapons. They already did that. They got the Stephon Diggs trade done. And now they are loading up on the defensive line to attack quarterbacks in that division. And I like the moves. Kind of like you're a closet Bears fan. I'm a closet Bills fan. My dad's entire side of the family, born and raised in Buffalo. All my aunts and uncles still live in Buffalo. All my cousins were born there. There's been a long amount of suffering after 4 Super Bowl appearances for the Bills, and it looks like the arrow's pointing up. Tom Brady leaves. They continue to add to a talented team, and boy, that D-line looks vicious now.
There's going to be a play next season where Jarrett Stidham is going to be in 3rd and 9 against Mario Addison, Ed Oliver, and Quentin Jefferson, backed up by Edmonds and Milano, with Hyde and Poyer and Trey White all in the set. Like, what the hell is New England going to do against that? With a first
Not as much as they used to.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the Bills fans are going to erupt. Like, Bills, everybody thinks about Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed and the K-Gun offense. And look, all those guys were fantastic. The Bills offensive line, Smurless, all those guys. That was an exciting side of the ball. But, Bruce Smith, Cornelius Bennett, all the guys they had in the secondary. Like, the Bills defense was ravaging back in the day. And if they get to anywhere near that level, I'm not saying that Mario Addison's Bruce Smith, don't get crazy with it. They've got a lot of talent. They can rotate it in, keep fresh, and bring them in waves, and they're going to do it. And if it gels, it's always a question of whether the guys gel with their teammates, whether the guys gel with the system, how quickly it comes together with new additions, always a thing. If this unit comes together quickly, they're going to hunt. They're going to be a force in that division. They are lining up that team to be very well set to compete for a division title.
I don't know if we're going to get Bills versus Chiefs or Bills versus Ravens next season. I haven't looked at regular season opponents in a while, but those two games I would absolutely kill to see because they are going to be so fun. So fun.
Super physical.
Super. Oh my God. I mean, that's a body bag game if I've ever seen one, just because both teams just beat the crap out of people. I can't wait to watch Buffalo next year. They're going to be like, because I refuse to watch Texans games now until Bill O'Brien's fired. I'm gonna watch the Bears every week, and I'm gonna watch the Bills every week, and I'll probably watch the Cardinals every week, because all three of those teams I don't think are getting enough respect, and I think they are going to be addicting to watch next year, all for different reasons. So I can't wait to watch Buffalo. I mean, God, speaking of addicting teams to watch, how many times have we seen Cleveland over the last 2 years add a player, and we keep going through the roster and we're like, okay, star. Clearly they had their problems last year. I think it was really mostly about coaching staff. But in terms of being addicting to watch, in terms of being a team that you want to watch every Sunday, whether you root for them or not, how do you not want to watch the Browns now that they've added Billings, Joseph, and BJ Goodson on top of everybody they've already signed? That we already talked about, Hooper, Conklin. I mean, I don't know how they have the money to afford all of this, but like literally you go through the Cleveland roster, they might have one of the most impressive rosters in the entire league.
Yeah, and they're taking chances on wild cards too. I mean, I know you're very familiar with Kevin Johnson and was a great player before injury. Who knows? Maybe he comes back healthy, regains some form. But Billings, highly underrated, strong as hell. Again, a down eater in the middle of the line. Has some sneaky pass rush ability. He was one of those workout stars, came through the combine. Everybody was amazed by his strength. Crazy, crazy strong. One of the strongest guys in the league. And I think can play a really solid contributing role on the Cleveland defense. Carl Joseph, we talked about as a possible target for anybody that needed a solid, contributing, strong safety. Again, was drafted highly in the first round. Played decently. Hasn't played at a star level, but has played at a solid level and is a big hitter. So he's going to add some fireworks to their secondary when he's in there. And I like BJ Goodson. I've liked him since he came out in the draft. He's got some speed. He's athletic. He's a little bit undersized, but when he connects, he's going to be a very good sort of, I don't know that he's going to start for them. He might, they've had some linebackers move on, but I think he's one of those talented guys that gets overlooked a little bit. His contract's incredibly reasonable. He's one of those sort of glue guys, lunch pail guys, whatever you want to call them, team builder guys. You got to have guys like that on the roster. They got to play, backup inside linebacker, backup outside linebacker, maybe special teams. And Goodson, great speed, again, can attack ball carriers, has some special teams experience after the last couple of years. Like, it's a good trio. It's not the headlining trio. Certainly Conklin and Hooper are going to get all the headlines in the ink in Cleveland, but these three guys are, again, sort of foundational guys that you bring in to build your team who are going to contribute maybe a little bit more than people think they might.
So who would you rather have at Mike, Sione Takitaki or BJ Goodson? Because I think Mac Wilson's probably locked in for Will. So I think
I
Mike,
would hope.
I would hope so. Yeah. So I think the true competition is going to be Takitaki and Goodson for Mike. I don't really know if they're going to play a whole lot of base. So I think like it'll be pretty much just Mike and Will getting most of the snaps. So
sure.
Right now, who would you take? Just going off your college evaluation of Takitaki, because obviously he didn't play a whole lot last year. Goodson or him to be the starter at Mike?
Oh, it's a really good question. Which down, what distance? But I think, maybe one of those guys rises. Again, new coaching staff in Cleveland. They're going to have a sort of fresh slate with everybody. BG is a new arrival. Taki's been there. But again, you got a new system. You got new coaches coming in. You got new requirements, new things that are desirable traits in those systems. And maybe one of them through OTAs, assuming there are OTAs. If there's no OTAs, I'd say Taki because he's familiar with his teammates. A little bit of an advantage moving into whatever we get for preseason. But if it was a straight up regular year with full OTAs and veteran mini camps and all that, then I'd say, the coaching staff's going to have the things that they like, and whichever of those players rises to that. I don't think there's a huge I can't think of one defining trait from either of those guys that's like, oh no, they want this. Again, because there's a new coaching staff. I couldn't tell you what they want right now on their defense or what they value more highly. It's two good options to fill at a sort of non-premium position. Let's say that.
I think the only thing that we know that they value highly, and this is just because I got told by my friends in the Browns over and over and over
again. Cheater.
The only thing that they would tell me, because again, when I was talking to them, they were still in the restructure and everything, was fullback. We need a fullback. That's what Kevin wants. Kevin wants a fullback. We're getting a fullback. We don't know who. We don't know how. We're getting a fullback. And then they traded for Andy Janovich from Denver because Denver, they're kind of moving into a system that doesn't really use that as much. And Stefanski absolutely wants to run 21 personnel as much as humanly possible. And so they threw a 7th rounder, I think it was, at Denver to get Janovich, who's a very versatile fullback. He's got solid hands, good blocker, really understands the kind of system they run. He's very comfortable.
Tough as hell.
Oh, he's super tough. He's special teams value. I mean, they're going to run outside zone over and over and over again. He really understands angles. Like that was, again, that's a pickup that nobody's talking about that's going to make a massive impact for that offense because they're going to be using him a lot. A lot. And so I think everything Cleveland's done, beyond bringing in Billings, who I think gives them yet another piece on that defensive line, which is, I don't want to say it's loaded, but it's pretty damn close to loaded. In addition to Joseph, Sendejo, I'm not super wild about as a starter. I still think Redwine, deserves a shot to be the starting free safety, but Sendejo, I think, could be a strong veteran presence, potentially get some special teams work. When you look at bringing in, obviously, Conklin, who we talked about last episode, who some $14 million is just an unbelievable deal for him.
Varsity.
You could potentially be looking at like a 22 personnel look with Njoku and Hooper, and then Janovich and Chubb or Hunt, and then Odell, I guess, would be the default. But I mean, you still got Jarvis, you still got Taywan Taylor, It is an unfathomable amount of talent on this Browns roster relative to, I think, what people are used to seeing from the Browns. But over the last 2 or 3 years, they have truly built a juggernaut on paper. And I think it's up to the coach and it's up to the quarterback to make use of that juggernaut. There was the only way that I think they lost so many games last year was because of who was their coach. And their staff not helping out Baker Mayfield. We know.
Yeah, I agree.
We know that they're changing Baker's footwork to get his depth shorter in drops to help out their tackles. We know that Baker's working harder this offseason to establish chemistry with his receivers so that all those interceptions off tip balls because he misses behind them by a yard don't happen anymore. We know they're committing to building the offensive line and adding weapons and installing a system that actually fits Baker's skill set. Like, am I crazy for thinking that it's them and Baltimore for the division and that it's really not that far off, between them? Am I nuts for that?
I don't know that you're nuts. I'm just super gun shy because I looked at all the talent last year and the success they'd had the year before that, and they got rid of Hugh, and I was like, yeah, it's time, right? Dog pound, let's go. And it didn't happen. So I'm a little bit gun shy about saying that. I love their personnel on paper just like you do. I look down every position and say, yep, like that guy. Yep. Love that guy coming out. Yep. that guy's a sleeper if they can just unlock him. And, plus they have the top end talent. And, a guy like Case Keenum, he's there. If Baker gets the slobber knocked out of him, Keenum can come in and he'll throw it up. And those receivers are going to appreciate that, right? OBJ is going to go get it. And Joku's going to be like, sure, he's going to toss it to me when I'm covered. Cool. I'll do it. So they've set themselves up to compete again on paper. And it's all about how Baker gels with Stefanski and the offensive staff and whether he takes to those changes. And again, how fast that defense comes together with these new pieces, these new supporting pieces to support, like you said, Ogunjobi and all those guys. Like the talent on that roster is crazy, crazy deep. So they'll be a fun team to watch. I hope. I thought they'd be an exceptionally fun team to watch last year and gave up on about week 6 because it became very clear that the coaching staff wasn't capable of doing what they needed to do to bring out what they needed to bring out.
How many games would Sean McVay win with that roster? Like if you knew you had
more than the Rams. More than the Rams. Wow. I almost want to say how many games would another Sean win with that roster, which is Sean Payton.
Oh God, 12?
I would say pretty much lock for easily double digits and probably 11 if things broke their way 12. Like, straight up. Just
they would split. They would split with Baltimore. They'd beat the tar out of Cincy. I can't remember who they're playing in the other divisional.
I don't really
battles,
think it would matter if you give Peyton that much talent. And again, he meshes with Baker and they don't fight. Like you could reel off a lot of games. It's a very, very talented roster. That's what we're trying to say, folks. We know we've been kicking the dead horse here for 5 minutes, but go look at the roster seriously.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's loaded.
What would you say? Because I think Detroit's made a lot of moves as well. I don't know if I'm as wild about their overall roster as I am with Cleveland, but I think there's still a lot to work with there. I think there's a clear theme on their additions, which is we're bringing in as many Patriots as humanly possible, which isn't necessarily...
What a shocker.
It's not a bad thing.
Patriots coach.
I mean, we love Jamie Collins. We love Harmon. I mean, again, it's not a bad thing. I'm not 100% sure if Trufant is a fit with Matt Patricia, not in terms of skill set, in terms of personality. Because Patricia has a very unique coaching style, and I'm not super sure that Trufant's going to be okay with that. But I mean, we'll see. I'm going
to ask you a question about that though, because we had an opportunity when we were at the Senior Bowl to really sort of see Patricia and his staff and how they worked. And that's an enlightening experience for anybody that gets the chance, is to watch how the coaching staff works with the talent through those, really the 3 days of practices. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the big days to watch them on field, how they run the drills, how they move people, what coaching points they're dropping, how they get into guys or not. And I got to say, of the two coaching staffs, I was much more impressed with Patricia and his staff. And it seems like he's adjusted because he came in, the division that I root for, right? I'm a Chicago Bears fan, so NFC North. Seemed like Patricia came in the first year. What I heard from all the Detroit beat writers was, man, it's sort of his way or the highway. He's not very relatable to us, to them. Not sure he's going to make it, right? And he seemed so much more... Well, how did he seem to you in Mobile? And then I'll tell you what
jovial.
I thought.
In a word, just jovial. Like he was great. I loved him.
Very comfortable in his own skin, right?
He coaches the hell out of people. I mean, he is rough.
He seems to have hit his groove, right? Yeah, he was greeting guys. I would say the same thing. Like it was family, it was familial. He seemed so much more comfortable as a person, as a coach. His staff was dialed. Definitely his practices were much tighter and more well run than the Cincinnati staff, I would say. And, he was a little bit, He definitely they had their agenda, right? They knew what they wanted and they were okay with that. It wasn't that they were trying to ram it down people's throats. It was, hey, this is the way we do things. If you want to come along, we're going to notice. I think Detroit could turn a corner because of that, because he's found a little bit more of his comfort. Now, it's a huge year in Detroit for him, you know, and the GM. I think they're kind of tied together. But it seems like he's figured that out. So I think the thing with Trufant, what I'm sort of driving at here, might be less of an issue than it would have been a year or two ago.
I think there's a reason why he brought in all these Patriots that know him and know that kind of culture, which is a very coach-centric culture. It's not a player-centric culture. Not saying that's a bad thing. That's just how it is. A lot of teams,
it's how it's aligned.
You know, sure. We see the good side of that with the Patriots, where teams buy in and they trust the coach. We see the bad side of it with the Texans, where players don't trust the coach. It's a very results-oriented type of gamble, I think, where if you're winning and you're successful, the players will accept it. And I think the reason why he brought in a lot of Patriots was to reinforce the locker room with guys that are used to that environment, that can almost like reassure the locker room of like, trust us, he's amazing, you got to listen to him. And almost getting more voices to buy into that kind of culture because they already bought in with him when he was in New England. I think that's part of the reason. It wasn't just because they know the system, it was because they know the culture and can kind of reinforce what Patricia wants among the guys that are already on his team. I think that's a gamble that is well worth it. I don't know if I would say that Patricia's on the hot seat as much as Detroit media wants him to be, because Detroit media doesn't like Patricia, but I do think that he needs to have results this season or he's in trouble. And so he's bringing in guys that can help his team buy in and bring results this season, just irrespective of their individual talent levels. I love Collins as a linebacker. I love Trufant as a corner. I love Harmon as like a nickel and a safety and a special teamer. Vitae, I think if they keep him at guard, I'm okay with that. We talked about Nick Williams before the show. I think it was a very sneaky signing for only $5 million a year for rotational defensive tackle because they had to replace Ashawn Robinson. So like the actual roster moves themselves in a vacuum, I think are fine. But the culture building, like we talked about with Vegas, was even more important. It wasn't just that they brought in names, it was which names they brought in. And I think that's going to go a long way to keeping, honestly, Patricia around for more than just 2020.
Yeah, I think that's true. They needed an outside corner. They knew they were going to trade Slay. Desmond Trufant, one of the best available in terms of talent-wise now, fit-wise, we'll see. Nick Williams, I just want to say to all the Detroit fans out there, you're going to love Nick Williams. He is a hard-working dude. He is a little bit like Quentin Jefferson that we talked about earlier coming from the Seahawks. He's a guy that had production, especially when there were stars around him before Akeem Hicks got hurt. He was wrecking people. Preseason, he looked very, very good. Early in the season, first month of the season for Chicago, he was very effective. Also happens to be one of the largest human beings I've ever seen.
Oh, he's gigantic.
His biceps are about the size of my chest, and I'm not a small guy. Like, I'm 6 foot, 200 pounds, and standing next to Nick Williams, I swear to God, his bicep right below his shoulder is probably about the size of my chest. He is just a massive dude. Very nice, very relatable guy, but had quiet production. Was really hoping that he would stay with the Bears. He moves to a division rival, which is kind of a double bummer, but Detroit fans are going to love him, and Patricia, I'm sure, loves just that ethic. Lunch pail guy, doesn't have to pay him a ton of money, knows what he's going to get out of him, and can count on him to do his job. Not many people are going to move him off that sort of end or 5-tech spot, no matter how they use him. So congratulations to the Lions on getting Nick Williams. He's a very solid player.
I want to get your thoughts on, I guess we're running a little bit long, so this will be the last team we talk about. There's so many to talk about, obviously. We'll probably do another episode on the remaining free agent teams. I want to get your thoughts on this trio, or really of the general offseason they've had before I give mine, because I think they've had one of the quieter, but also one of the best offseasons in the league, and that's the Chargers, who have signed a lot of really, really productive veteran players that are kind of going all in on one last ride, and that's Brian Bulaga, Linval Joseph, and Chris Harris, all in one free agency haul, all for, in my opinion, good contracts. Quarterback is obviously still a question. Depends on how much you love Tyrod Taylor. But I think in terms of filling needs and filling needs with responsible money, it's hard to find a better trio than Bulaga, Joseph, and Chris Harris for the Chargers.
They're all productive. Bulaga, I have respect for, former Packer. Don't love him. Really like his fit, though, with the Chargers. Think he, again, like you said, fills a need. They got him for what I would call him a, responsible contract, especially given his pedigree. Linval Joseph, have always been a fan of his ability to just shut things down in the middle. His last time up in free agency, I was really hoping the Bears would sign him as an interior defender. And Chris Harris was a bit of a surprise to end up in a Chargers uniform. Really thought he was going to go probably to the Chiefs. And the fact that he chose a division rival, and let's talk about that defense for a minute. Like, the Chargers defense looks...
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Again, this is on paper, but the addition of Chris Harris... That secondary, oh man, forget it. There's just talent at every level. That is a scary defense to play.
We talk about the Bills' third down package. Here's the Chargers' third down package: Joey Bosa, Linval Joseph, Melvin Ingram. I was a huge fan of Jerry Tillery, so we'll see what he does in year 2.
Tillery's so underrated.
I love Tillery coming out of Notre Dame. I thought he was a top 15 talent. They got him, I think, at 19 or 20, somewhere around there. So that's your front four. Your linebackers.
Do we need to keep going? That's enough to cause anybody to throw the ball in 2 seconds.
Your secondary: Casey Hayward, Chris Harris, Desmond King, Derwin James, Nasir Adderley. I mean, what the hell?
Yeah, they are built to compete in that division. We've talked about how many talented running backs, wide receivers are in that division, not to mention quarterbacks for sure. But going against the Chargers defense, it's not a week you're going to look forward to as an offensive coordinator. You're going to look at the talent. Again, health has been a major problem with the Chargers. The biggest problem for, I think, anybody in the league. The Chargers sort of walking wounded for the last, it's just a joke, right? Multiple somebodies always go down. Doesn't always happen on defense, but we've seen Hunter Henry get injured. Just the list of injuries out of the Chargers camp in the last 2 or 3 years. If you're not familiar with it, go take a look. It's vicious. If they stay healthy, which is a massive if for them, you're going to look at that defense and go, oh, well, what the hell am I going to do?
What are my matchups? Right?
Yeah. Where am I going to go? Where are the holes? There aren't really holes. It'd be great to kind of run inside zone off the left side or the right side, maybe attack one of the linebackers that's not as good, but good luck getting through that line to do it. And by the time you stumble through the first 4 defenders, if you can get a couple of doubles off, you're going to get cleaned up. You're going to get cleaned up hard. So there's just, if I'm sitting down to sketch out a plan for the week and I look at the personnel and the scheme of the Chargers, oh boy, we better try some deception and get them to move, which isn't necessarily going to work either because their players in the secondary, who are their quarterbacks, are pretty heady players. They're not going to be easy to bait and are terribly athletic on top of that. So even if they do take a wrong step in the bucket, they're going to be able to recover. It's just not a defense that's going to give you a lot of room to breathe.
They have, honestly, one weakness, in my opinion, and that's speed at boundary corner. Because Hayward and Harris, neither one of them are really burners. Ironically, they have more speed at safety than they do at boundary corner. So I think if there was one weakness that, say, the Chiefs could get them on, it's Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman on just straight up go routes. If they can get one-on-ones and catch them in a single
rotate him at the outside.
That's sure. It. But Pat has to survive long enough against Bosa, Joseph, and Ingram to throw it. So in a way, it's a weakness, but kind of a situational weakness. They have to almost go into max.
Yeah, they've got some overlap to cover that up. So
you got to go into max protect to really punish them with it. And we know that zone scheme is just they try to force everything underneath anyway, and then they rally and tackle. So I think the Chiefs matchup specifically with the Chargers, we could do a whole episode on just schematically how that even would look. And
Ooh, that'd be fun.
We'll probably do one as soon as we get the schedule. We'll probably kind of figure out what, because I think like that would be a really good like preview episode for when they play each other next year. Because we were talking about matchup defenses that going up against matchup offenses. Like the Chiefs are a matchup offense, and the Chargers have literally every piece they need to shut that down. I think it's almost guaranteed that we get a Sunday Night Football matchup between these two teams because it is going to be fireworks no matter what.
Yeah, and they've still got draft picks, right?
And they still have picks, yes.
If they could add, some fireworks there, either in the secondary, they could add another sort of speedy, multi-role safety,
oh my
corner,
God.
nickel.
What if they get Isaiah Simmons?
Oh
my God.
was gonna say, I was working on it. You beat me to it. But if you put him in that, then you can rotate him everywhere from outside to fully inside to, imagine him as a sort of big nickel, force slot edge rusher hybrid wide 9. Right?
They don't need him, but I want it to happen.
I know you want it to happen because you can just take him and Derwin James and just like flip them around and you get that positionless defense that everybody's talking about, and you could wreck people with it. Because if you don't know which two of those is coming in addition to their front 3 or 4, depending on how they're aligned, like any 5-man rush involving those 6 players. Like, just pick your 5.
What do you do? Like, if you're the Chiefs, what do you do? Travis Kelce, it's like, oh, we'll just get a matchup on a linebacker. Oh, that linebacker's Isaiah Simmons? Crap. Okay, let's get a matchup on a safety. Oh, that safety's Derwin James? Okay.
Yeah.
We're kind
of the same thing.
We're running 6-man protection today.
Yeah, it would be a really fun pickup. I don't know that that's necessarily the way they're going to go. But you mentioned Tyrod again, following the Bills. I've always been a Tyrod fan. I think he's a bit underrated. There'll be some fun fireworks for the first half of the year before DC's kind of lock him down again. There's a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball there. So I think Tyrod Taylor's a good, solid player for them. And, if they don't go out and get a Tua or a Herbert or a Love for that matter, because I think that's maybe more likely than people think it is. It'll still be a really interesting offense to watch, sort of solidly run. A lot of the things we said at the top of the episode about Teddy being a point guard, Tyrod Taylor can do that, and he's certainly got plenty of talent on the offensive side of the ball. The defense, we just talked about it. It's matchup nightmare. It's a wrecking crew, and if they add more talent to it, which they're likely to do, look out. That's, I think, a matchup episode for kind of every week for the Chargers would be a lot of fun to do. But with the time we got left, there's still, a lot of hole pluggers, a lot of guys at the bottom end of the free agency spectrum, sort of third wave, if you want to call it that, low end contracts, guys that didn't get picked up who can fill holes. Again, just so a team can go into the draft and say we could play right now. We don't need a blank because we got one. Who's the guy that's left on the board that you really like?
Maybe it's the Texans fan in me, but I can't not look at Jadeveon Clowney and see all the things he can do. I get he's not going to get the market maybe he expected. It probably has to do a little bit with the lack of ability for teams to check his medical. I think that's probably a huge part of it, to be honest. Is he the best pass rusher? No. He's pretty stiff in the hips, but in terms of versatility, you can line him up literally anything from 3 technique all the way out to like a wide 9 and get production. I think using him as kind of like that roving Mike linebacker, as a blitzer on third downs where you just line him up over the center and say, go hunt, which he did in Houston, and he did a little bit in Seattle, because especially with somebody as explosive and as powerful as him, if you can just tell him to line up over the center and then just attack the center before he can get set with that snap hand back up into his chest, you can blow him off the ball and immediately collapse the pocket. He's famous for doing that all the time. And so I think having that piece where he's strong enough to play 3 technique and hold up against the run. He's fast enough to play edge and get at least some production as a pass rusher. Not a whole lot. He's not Khalil Mack, but he gets enough. The ability to put him on the second level, the ability to play standing up or with his hand in the dirt. Like, he's so versatile and so important, and it's hard to really comprehend how important he is with his skill set until he's on your team. Then you see, oh, okay, teams literally can't run to the left side because they're averaging 0.3 yards per carry every time they do, because that's where he is. Okay, maybe this is important. So it's almost hard to quantify until you look at his full body of work and then see how big a difference he makes. Do I think he should make $20 million a year? Again, that really entirely relies on medical, but I know what my eyes see, and my eyes see a really damn good football player. And if I was any team, I don't care what system I run, because he can fit any system, I want Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah, he's tremendously effective. I'm with it. The medical's a thing, but he played, pretty strongly in Seattle last year. Again, not the super flashy bendy sack, edge that everybody believes is the end all be all and sort of rates edges against, right? It's I will go to my grave, or at least if that's any time soon, saying that modern NFL fans over rely on the sack as a statistic. But I'm with you. Clowney is an effective player, and the money is kind of the question, especially as we move farther on. Less teams have it, so the fits are going to decline, and probably overall his paycheck's going to decline. But doesn't mean he's any less of a player. So I was going to go with an edge rusher as well. I was going to go with Everson Griffin. Very familiar with him in Minnesota. Still think he has stuff left in the tank and can be a guy, much like Quinn, that the Bears just signed, that can come off the edge and provide a bunch of juice and really enhance most teams' pass rush. But what it really came down to is Eric Reed. Eric Reed had a bit of a down year last year, and people jumped on me on Twitter this week, not surprising, and said, whoa, you had 1 million tackles, depending on your team statistic of choice. You had like 95 tackles and 4 sacks. That's a down year. To which I answered, safety tackles are not necessarily the best way to tell if a safety's playing well. Because if a safety has a ton of tackles, you've got other holes. That's not what you want. You don't want a safety with 125 tackles. So Eric Reed, very heady safety, good hard hitter. Still, I would say nothing wrong with him physically. Had a bit of a down year in coverage. His coverage grade was about half of most of his previous years, no matter whose statistics you use. I think he's just perfectly placed as a rebound player, as a player that could go in, provide coverage. I think his levels are going to rebound. I don't think this is a late career sort of a slide for him. And, quite frankly, unfortunately for him, but fortunately for teams, nobody's going to pay him a ton of money right now because he had a bit of a down year last year. That allows a team like, say, the Bears to sweep in and pay him not a lot of money, because if you look at what safeties are getting right now, they're not getting bank. It's not a premium position for the most part. And you could get a guy like Eric Reed, match him with a guy like Eddie Jackson, and the two of those guys would provide you a very capable, very smart, physical, fast safety tandem that allows Chuck Pagano, again, a former defensive coach, to run a lot of different coverages, a lot of different schemes, and do a lot of different things with his defense and not worry about what his safeties are doing or really what their limits are, right? Reed still has a full variety of skills, and he's a good tackler. He's physical, and usually, not last year, but usually his pass coverage rates are really good. So I think Eric Reed is one of those guys that has some tread left on the tire and is going to come at a team to a great value.
Yeah, and I think especially if he goes to Chicago, one of the main values is that he can actually play in the box and survive in the box, unlike I think Ha-Ha-Ha is not really, built to be a strong safety. He really sees the field better from a deep alignment. He doesn't really see it as well from like a 10 to 15 yard depth and then come up and play along the line of scrimmage as like a force player. Whereas Reed, I think, can. And the fact that Reed can do that means that Eddie can be a full-time free safety again, where he was extraordinarily effective in 2018. Arguably should have been the defensive player of the year. But he had to spend a lot more time near the line of scrimmage last year because Ha-Ha couldn't do it. And I think, I don't want to say it limited him as a player, but I think it took away a lot of potential game-changing production that Eddie has when he plays deep. And so having Reed there will let Eddie be Eddie.
Yeah, and you mentioned it when you were talking about the Chargers, and Eddie is best when he can dig his heels in and drive on the ball.
Yes.
Like, he's a very good deep third player, but he's also best or most impactful or makes most of those game-changing plays when he can have it in front of him and break on the ball. He's got a very good click and close. He's got cornerback in his past at Alabama. He played both positions, and that is what he does. It's almost like that zone float look where he is waiting. He sees whatever's occurring because his instincts are so good. That click and close to come forward in the defense, and make a play on the ball is what really makes him special. That's harder to do when you're jacked up against the line of scrimmage. So again, give him a little bit of depth and allow him to drive forward on those plays, and you're going to see a rejuvenated stat line for Eddie Jackson. He was still very effective last year, but he didn't have the splash plays.
Yeah.
And largely those are where those plays come from.
They had him playing the hook zone so damn much because HaHa couldn't do it, or at least not as well. And if you don't have a good hook zone player and you're playing a lot of single high coverages, whether it's, cover 3 or, maybe a little bit of cover 6, if you don't have a good hook zone player that can like not get totally roasted in the seams, which HaHa couldn't do, then unfortunately it just kind of forced Eddie into that role. And I think that's why HaHa's no longer a Bear, is because they know what Eddie's the best at, and they want to sign somebody who I think can let him be that. So I think Eric Reed, even though he's not a Bear yet, I almost imagine him in a Bears jersey at this point because he's a perfect fit.
Yeah, nice synergy. So it'd be really cool if the two of them could come together.
Yeah.
Well, we should probably get out of here because we've been at this an hour and 20 minutes. But before we do that, I wanted to give a huge thank you for the huge takeoff of both the YouTube channel for Bootleg Football and the podcast. The reception has been off the charts on both channels. Can't thank you all enough. Want you guys to stay safe, guys and gals, to stay safe. We'll keep cranking out the content. If you're stuck in your house or can't move or you got a self-distance, no problem. We'll be giving you as much as we can, and we might even be looking at some live stuff coming up. So take a look for that. Could be maybe, a live mock draft on Twitch.
Cough,
but what do you got? Yeah, cough. Well, no coughing right now, just hint. So what do you got coming up, Brett?
I'm working on a Joe Burrow film room episode. I will fully credit EJ for indoctrinating me into the church of Joe Burrow as a sociopathic serial killer. He is 100% a serial killer. That is my take. Because man, you miss on him once and he will murder you. He is so good under pressure.
He does not let you get a second chance. If you let him get free, his eyes come up immediately and he will massacre you. But I'm sure you will lay that out very clearly in the film room for everybody that loves your work there. So look for that as well. But thanks so much for sticking with us. We are extremely grateful that you guys are hanging with us, enjoying the content. You've put on some great comments on YouTube. Feel free to go into any of your major podcast suppliers, leave reviews there. That does help us get into the algorithm and seen by even more folks. So that's fantastic. But you can find my work at Windy City Gridiron. You can follow me on Twitter at the Draftsman FB. Where does everybody find your stuff, Brett?
That is at Brett Coleman everywhere. That's KOLLMANN. It is a super German spelling. Or you just type in the film room on YouTube, and I'm sure my stuff will pop up.
Cool. Well, we will be back at you fairly quickly. As Brett said, we'll probably have another episode on free agency. But until then, hang tight, stay safe, keep listening to the content, and we'll be back before you know it.